Hello and welcome to the very first Energetic Arts question answer training session. So, I've specifically not picked a topic on this one because I wanted to allow the questions to direct the session today. One of the things that I found training in martial arts is that once you go into a format for a while, you get to the point where you sort of find the edges of the format, and your body starts to become used to that sort of training thing. So if you have your warm up and you go into the next phase of training, and there's you go into these blocks of training, and then eventually you finish up and you have your cool down. Your body will start to, and your mind will start to become really accustomed to how that works, and so you're not going to worry about um, you know pushing yourself into a new place that's unknown to you to make your brain and body work in new ways. And so what I found was when I started to become a little tired of those formats, um, we started to move into a new phase of training, which was pushing ourselves into these unknown spaces so that we were able to um, adapt to new circumstances, situations we couldn't think of. And so when I moved into a different style, one which was a bit more intuitive after doing several others, um, one of the things that was addressed, which wasn't really addressed in any other topics, was the ability to receive those strikes and you know to relax into those uncomfortable situations. And so we started to train into those uncomfortable situations, and what that would do is that would induce a certain response in us. And then we'd work with the responses and we'd use those responses. So typically, these stimulations, these signals from the environment or from your training partner, would put you into a state of fight, flight, or freeze, um, which is pretty easy to do. All you have to do is put the mind and body into a situation it's never been in before. And even if it's a good feeling, a really blissful feeling, um, its natural reaction is to contract and to withdraw, or to try and manage the situation, or just to freeze. And so what we would do is we would put ourselves in these situations, we would start to um, relax into them, and then we would observe how the body and mind and the emotions um, get triggered. And then we'd identify these triggers, and then we'd start to discharge them through breathing exercises and just release the tension that way. And then also, once we'd start to release the tension, become back to a neutral state, we'd start to go with the movement and start to redirect the movement. And so this was putting us into a state of no mind. And this, I believe, at least at the time when I was training in it, was the ultimate state of awareness, because um, you transcend that fear of being attacked. You transcend that fear of the unknown. And although you still feel the fear and you still feel the impacts of those new stimulations, you start to ride the waves rather than to resist them and have them crash on you. And so then you become a skilled wave rider. So the idea behind the question and answers, for me and for you watching, is that these questions that are going to come in either online or in the training sessions themselves, or through other people asking the questions on video, what's going to happen is they're going to typically hone in on some kind of core coding that everyone's adopted over the years, and then we can start to work with it. So in effect, it'll be like doing a hot seat one-on-one, but instead of only doing it in a session one-on-one, people can look in and observe. You can put yourself in the position of the questioner, and then we can train with the question to resolve the answer, if there is one, which there usually always is within the question. And then once we've found that answer, then we can start to train it into our system and approach the topic, the stimulus, the problem from a new perspective. And then from that new perspective, we can act differently, think differently, feel differently. And of course, then we can have a new experience. Now, the whole purpose of this is, once you get skilled at this, is to help you navigate through the multi-universe of infinite timelines. And rather than doing the old school way of training, which is force meets force. You're here, you want to get to there, so therefore you have to attract it to you, like through law of attraction and all that sort of stuff. Instead of doing that, what we're going to do is we're going to realize that infinite possibility awaits us just beyond the edge of our current mindset and our current frequency. And once we can express the charge around the limited mindset, we can move through it and beyond it, and then it'll open us up to that infinite space to be able to tune in to the timeline that we're seeking. And then we can move our energy towards that, combine, link in with it, and then embody it in this time and space. And we can collapse that new future into our reality. Now, when I say that, bear in mind the future that you're holding in mind in your imagination is a potential. And from this point in time, this jump point in time, if you align your frequency with it, then typically in time, roads or pathways or lanes, highway. If we don't make any changes, we know exactly where we're going to go because we've been there before. But if we change our energy and we move and shift our energy to a separate timeline ever so slightly, we're going to take an exit lane and it's going to take us onto a new road. And if we keep going down that road, over time, through time, then eventually we'll end up at a new destination altogether. And so this isn't about, at first at least, jumping into a whole new future, like stepping through a portal, although it is. But what happens is we make these shifts incremental, we make them short, and we get consistent with them. And then we do that in a way where we can do that comfortably. We can do that as a new norm. And we're doing this all the time. It's just maybe we're not doing it with much awareness or much precision, or maybe we want to step it up to a new level of energy shift where we take a bigger leap. And so I've got a few questions that came in online that we'll begin with, and it's by someone who's been training with me for a while now. And I'm happy to mention the person name after I get permission, but at the moment, I just rather respect the person's privacy. So we'll just say it's a him. And just bear in mind that this is his second language. And so if when I read out loud, if I'm not making any errors reading out loud, then just know that if the grammar's off or the speech is off, it's because this is someone writing in the second language. And to ask and construct questions at this kind of level of awareness in a different language is uh, is an amazing feat. So let's all just be a little patient and tolerant. So, um, obviously there's a greeting, and there's shows a bit of gratitude for what he's learning, and which I appreciate. And we get to the question. My questions are more about the process within meditation. The nature of all this is pretty abstract, and I try to understand it in a more tangible way, if ever possible. Just to give you an idea, you're talking about the edges and to identify them and to lean into them. What do you mean with this edge? What are they for you? Do you feel them? And for me, they're on a feeling level. For example, I lean into my body sensations. I feel the most within my first chakra during the meditations. And then I lean into the sensation and I discover that the sensation increased. At one occasion, it actually got quite intense, which was very interesting. But often my mind stops me from repeating it because I'm not focused enough. What do you think? Could that be an access point? And should I start practicing here? So I think this is a really good question, because in previous videos, especially in the meditation, when I'm leading people into a certain state or emotion, feeling, I say lean into it, okay? And the reason why I say lean into it is because when we're going into that unknown space and we're moving from an old mind frequency, which is comfortable and known, we've got it all managed and worked out, and we're stepping into an unknown space, typically, and especially remember, from your level of awareness, you're stepping into this almost by yourself, even though we're doing this in a group. But for you, it's going to be very personal. And so that stepping into that unknown can be quite scary or intimidating or fearful or just plain unusual. And so you will feel or sense that there's an edge, like where the boundary of where your mind and your experience is. And then beyond that, there's the unknown. All right. And sometimes it's very gentle and it's hard to notice. And other times it's very obvious. And so when I say lean into it, I mean, before you take the big leap, and jump in there and force yourself through, if you just start leaning and inching your way into that new space, then what happens is you give your body and mind a little bit of time to adjust into that new frequency and sort of get comfortable with it, even if it's only for a moment, before you pop through to the other side. And even when you're through to the other side, I recommend you just stay there for a little bit and just acclimatize. All right. So an example of this that I can think of, first of all, is when, there's these alternative birthing processes. So women would do, say, a water birth, and there's all sorts of information to support that, and maybe not as well, to support that, children who have had a water birth have a less traumatic birth, and therefore it puts them in a state of mind where they can access certain levels of awareness, intelligence, motor development, all that much more rapidly. And it makes sense, because if you're inside a womb for 9 months and that's your whole world, and then when you get birthed, you're birthed out into a similar environment that is also a liquid-based environment, and then you emerge out into the real world of air and space and all that sort of stuff. then that's a much smoother transition than this, water breaking and you popping out into this environment that you've never felt before, and then you've got all these sensations of light and temperature, and someone's whacking you, and then you're getting wrapped up in a towel. You don't even know what a towel is, and all this weird stuff happens, and then so it can be quite a traumatic process and can start to shape your brain at a very malleable point of time in your life. So rather than do this shock process, which is really weird, especially in physical training, it's all about you know shocking the body all the time and creating so much stress that it's on the verge of shutting down, and then adapting and repairing to that. I mean, that's one way of doing it, but it's not very much fun, and the body doesn't like it too much, and the mind puts up its barriers before it can even get going. And every time it's confronted with the unknown, you're going to have these automatic responses. Okay, so rather than do it that way, we take small little incremental steps and we become used to the process of stepping into that unknown space. And so when we move in, we lean in. It's like inch by inch, it's a cinch. And so you get used to these new things. And when it comes to changing your life in a big way and going from one timeline to another timeline, it's similar to that birthing process. When you get to the other side, you want to go as far as you can. You want to shift as many timelines over as you can to shorten the distance between you and your goal, sometimes, so you can get there in as quickly and as easily as possible, in a way where it's easy. Like, well, why not do it easy? So when you get there, you're not freaking yourself out, okay? And you're not, waking up in this new timeline. You don't know who you are or where you are or what's going on, or it can be too much to handle. So rather than do it that way, it's better to do smaller jumps more often, frequently, in a pace that's really comfortable, and then you can start to extend that pace, those shifts in the timeline, larger and larger, until you become acclimatized to it and becomes your new normal. So just like going into the gym, first step is to show up. Second step is to do the exercise. Then you want to do it correctly. Then you want to find the right rhythm and the right reps and the right weight for you. And then you want to do the exercise and repeat that until you put enough stress on the body for it to force itself to change and adapt. And then you want to give it enough time to recover and heal. And so when it does come back to its normal, a new state of normal, it's at a new level of normal. Okay, and so this is what I mean when you lean in. Remember, this is a lifetime process. This is not something you go do at a weekend workshop. You do it over 3-4 days or a week, and then you make one shift and that's it, and you never do it again because it was too traumatic. You do little shifts, each day or every couple of days, or you do tiny little shifts several times a day. It's up to you. But I find that if you can get into a position where you can just move gently into that place, then over time, what you're going to do is you're going to become acclimatized to the process of change. And just like someone who jogs, several times a week, and that becomes their new norm, then you can do the same thing. And so I've just got a signal here that I need to get some power into this machine. So just hold on for just a moment and I'll be right back. Okay. So just want to minimize as much as we can surprises coming up like that. We can get caught off guard. Okay? Because a little bit of stress, a little bit of stimulus to force you into a new space is good. But, you know, too much is going to freak you out. So let's just go here for a sec. Just got some minor technical difficulties happening here. I've got to rectify. Okay. See if that works. Okay, now, next question that I had. Well, actually, let's continue on with that one just for a second. So at the end, he's also said, one occasion it got quite intense, which is very interesting, but often my mind stops me from repeating it because I'm not focused enough. So another edge could be when you run out of gas, when it's either physically, mentally, or emotionally. This is another edge, like when you cannot continue anymore. Just like we had before, the computer comes to the end of its power supply, a warning comes up. If you don't give me some fuel, it's all over, Red Rover, and I'm shutting this game down. And so, when you find yourself going into those states, um, you know, it can be very confronting. All right. So, and then you can have all these things come up like, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not fit enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't have enough emotional intelligence, I don't have enough concentration, not enough, not enough, not enough. Now, you've got to remember that although, and this is a great example of why edging is so important, is because sometimes when you're edging into an unknown space, you're not necessarily going into a space that's fearful, but you're leaving a known space that is restricting. And when you do, when you're on that edge and you move into that unknown space, you're going to be confronted with that unwritten question, which is, who am I on the other side of this edge of my known mind? And although, we say to ourselves consciously, I'm worthy, I want more, I deserve more. If you've been conditioned your whole life to operate within the boundaries of I'm not enough, and you have learned to make do with not enough, then when you start to get to the edge of the mind, which is the mind of not enough, and you step into that unknown, which is more than enough, then if your whole identity has been based on that core belief, then it's gonna rock your world, because you're gonna have to take into account all these different questions, like, who am I if I'm actually enough? What choices would I be making differently if I was enough? If I step into this new space, this new dimension where I'm actually enough, just being myself, then how much work is there to change things to align with that new self of mine? Because if you think about it, if your core program has been not enough, everything, every decision, every relationship, the place where you live, the vehicle you drive, the work that you do, may or may not be a product of that belief of not enough. And so it's like, holy shit, I have to go all the way back to the drawing board, and I have to question, or at least I have to flag everywhere in my life where that not enough has come up. So, that in itself can be a daunting task. And maybe you're not ready to take on that huge belief just yet, and maybe you are. And maybe you're stepping into that new edge because you want to start to deal with it. And so this is what I'm saying about when you shift timelines, is that it's not difficult to shift the timeline. Most people are like, oh, I need to have enough focus, I need to have enough energy, I need to put enough force into this and will, and I've got to have my beliefs all aligned and da da da. Well, not necessarily. Maybe if you just shift your energy towards and move past that edge, and then all of a sudden you're in new terrain, then you're going to see very quickly what aligns with that new belief of being enough, and with that which doesn't align with the belief of being enough. And then here's where the work comes in, and here's where the training comes in, because making these shifts aren't that difficult, but grounding them and making them your new norm can be difficult. That's where the work comes in. And so this is why I keep saying that the groups are important, because you're going to be working on problems and parts of the code together, and you, as a collective mind, you can get through them much faster rather than working on them alone. It's like a group of programmers collaborating on the same project. So be aware that maybe the limitations that you think are in the way of you moving in to that unknown future of yours that you've desired and you've been manifesting may not be a limitation at all. It may be something that you're holding on to because you don't know how to adjust to them not being there. It's almost like carrying a weight around for your whole life, and as soon as you put it down, you feel so light. It's a little bit weird. It's not easy to it throws you off balance because you've adjusted to this new weight. Or if you've ever had braces before and you finally get them out of your mouth, and then all of a sudden you can't stop licking your teeth because it just feels so unfamiliar, even though it's exactly what you've been working towards and wanting the whole time. So I think that makes sense. Okay, next question. Where are we? I lost it. Ah, here we go. Well, actually, there's a lot to this one question. So, also it says, I feel most within my first chakra during the meditations. Into that sensation, I discovered the sensation increased. This is interesting because it's not just about leaning into your first center. Um, it also points to a bigger topic here, and that is in this self-help community. There's a big emphasis on getting into your heart space, and I understand that because that's where the two energies converge. You know, you're in the first three seals, and then all of a sudden you get into the heart space, you get into that unity consciousness, and then from here, you go up into the higher levels, which is great, and that's where you want to be. You want to be in your heart space when you're navigating through these timelines because that's your compass. And you know, we think when we're operating from these lower seals down that if we manifest certain objects or people or events into our lives, then it's going to give us that feeling that we're looking for. But the opposite is true. If you start to feel the feeling first, then it's going to navigate you towards the timeline that you desire. And when you get there, it won't matter where you are, who you're with, or what you're doing, because you're going to feel an increased sensation in your body, and it's going to be reflected to you in your environment. But sometimes the energy that you're imagining and trying to align with is up here somewhere, and it's you want it to make its way all the way down into every part of your body. If you're cutting it off from here, then it's kind of like your head's going to be there, but your body's not going to be there. And there's going to be this incongruency and this disparity between what you're thinking and sensing inside your mind and what you're actually experiencing in your reality. And so you want this energy to ground itself into your body. And so bringing it down into your first center, your root chakra, is a good thing, I think. If you can anchor it down there, if you can anchor your new future down into your first center, then it only makes sense that when the energy travels up, it's going to have an easier time manifesting through the higher centers. And when that ends up coming out of the top of your head and starts projecting into your field, and then you can start to see what you're projecting and experience what you're projecting, and it comes back in and it comes up through the first center. If that first center is clear and the second center is clear and the third center is clear, it's going to make its way up to the fourth center really easily. Fourth center is going to move up into the fifth. You're going to start expressing and speaking your reality into existence. And because remember, language can program the mind. And then you're going to move up. Then when you're speaking and listening to your own voice, you're going to start to see the imagery of what you're saying. And then that is going to start to project out again into the field through the seventh center. And you're going to start to get into this cycle, this feedback loop of manifesting, observing, and experiencing. So sometimes you'll be drawn to put your awareness on particular energy centers, because that's where you need to sort of tune them in. Or maybe that's the center that's lagging behind, or maybe that's the center you need to put the energy in to create the cascade effect through the other centers. Think of one of those old World War II Spitfire fighter planes. And you've got this huge engine, which is like got all these, I don't know how many V8s put together it was to make a circular engine. And in the middle, they turn the pistons turn the rod around, which turns the propeller. And so to start that off, it takes a lot of force. So what they would do is put almost like a gunshot charge into the engine that would kick the motor over, and then it would, which would push start the next engine, and then they'd all start to fire in unison, and then you'd get this roaring, powerful engine that's going to propel you to wherever you want to go. And so perhaps, starting off in the first center is a good thing. And like I said before, when you start to lean in, you might get to the point where that center's about to fire off. And if it does, it's going to fire off the second center, and then the second center is going to fire off the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth and the seventh, and then it's going to go into this feedback loop. And it's a bit like a programmer coding the matrix. You're like, okay, I think I've got this pretty much right. The code looks right, and if I hit go, if I hit execute, it's going to run the program. But before I do, hang on, I can see it. I need to correct this and correct that on the second and third center, and maybe the fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh centers. So I'm just going to wait for that code to get right and get that all linked in first before I hit execute. And so this is good awareness. If you're bringing your awareness to that, and that that's why you're not doing it. You're not leaning in and firing off that first center. And so this is why, although I haven't done one myself, because there's so many out there, it's really good to do a chakra balancing meditation or a blessing of the energy center meditation, and just tune those energy centers in before you start, putting the pedal to the metal and really letting that high charge frequency through your system. Because if you've ever experienced that energy moving through your body and you're not aligned and you're not tuned in, it's going to throw a rod somewhere and it's going to shut you down, knock you unconscious. So I want to try to avoid that by keeping everything nicely tuned and trained in to a really smooth frequency. Okay, going on. Okay, within my meditation from last Tuesday, I also discovered that my edges might be my ability to visualize. I can imagine and visualize places or objects or situations I experience quite well. I can also see them from angles. I didn't see them in the real. Okay, I can see them from angles that I haven't seen in the real life. Okay. But I need to imagine, for example, the place. But if I need to imagine, for example, the place I live in 100 years from now, for example, it's very difficult for me because I don't have any reference, because I'm not sure how it will look like or how it would look. Okay. Would that be an edge? I know this practice is not about visualizing, but also about receiving information and letting things happen. You know, it is still a new training space for me. Try to orientate myself, and maybe I need to get some answers on the more basic questions about it at the moment. Although I feel very safe within the training. Cool. Okay, so yeah, I mean, visualizing 100 years out, it's a big jump, right? I'm not saying it can't be done. I mean, you know, writers have been doing it forever. You know, Jules Verne, Orson Welles, you know, these are just a few stories that, oh, Gene Roddenberry, you know, Star Trek, you know, you can visualize, um, or let's not use the word visualize, you can tune in to future timelines. It's not that difficult to do um, if you have good foundations and footings on which to jump off onto. So, for example, like, it's not a big jump for us to imagine that sometime in the future that the human race will be exploring space and that our computers will become so advanced that you know, we will be talking to robots as equally, or maybe not as equally. We'll see. But we will accept that that's a new norm, that we can communicate with non bio organic machines, for example. And so we can imagine what the future would look like, generally speaking, and to, you know, imagine yourself in that future 100 years from now. Well, there's a few things that you would have to consider first. One is, you know, with all the advances in medicine at the moment and talking about, you know, lengthening telomeres and extending the lifespan indefinitely and being able to heal the body and mind with the power of thought alone, we could potentially tune in to these potential futures by, you know, seeing ourselves being around that long, being healthy, and being ageless. If you were, for example, to be in this body and be able to freeze the aging process or tune it back to a time where your body was in better shape than it is now, for example, and lock that in, and just be living your life, as a 100-plus-year-old person in a young body. It would look something a bit, maybe the future would look something like that series Altered Carbon, which was a really cool sci-fi flick. But you could start to see that if you kept on learning about what you're learning about and stepping into the unknown, that you would very soon be in a position where you would have achieved a lot of things that you would not necessarily believe would be possible from the old paradigm of, we got 70 to 80 to 90 plus years and then we die old and ragged and full of diseases. Other stories to support this would be things like, those the vampire stories where, not that you would want to become a vampire, but you'd be able to live an immortal life. And over time, you would obviously become, you'd accumulate a lot of knowledge and experience and wisdom. You could amass a great fortune. You could travel the world. You could have all these experiences, knowing that you couldn't be killed, you couldn't die. And so this would allow you to start to play with all these fantasies about being able to obtain new skills and new abilities and learn multiple languages. And from all those new inputs, all that new material into your mind, if you were to put that all together, then you would have a whole slew of potential future realities available to you that weren't there within the edges of the old mind of 60, 70, 80, 90 years, and then you're dead. And so when we're dealing with some of these big of the mind and we're creating new targets, new destinations in the future, then sometimes having a very direct route there, especially from the mind that you're in, is hard to see all those stages. But you can start to piece together and break things down, and you can start to build a pathway there. And it's a bit like when you go traveling, physically overseas or to another country, or you're going to see several different countries. Planning the whole trip out, having a good guideline is great. You need that, but planning the whole trip out from start to finish can not only be very difficult, because if you miss a leg, then it throws everything out altogether, but can also limit and restrict you from moving freely and accessing a faster, easier path when it emerges in front of you in real time that you couldn't foresee based on where you were at the beginning. So I think, give yourself a bit of flexibility and have a bit of faith in your abilities, why don't you? So when you get out there, have confidence that you're going to be able to adapt, and you're going to be able to handle certain situations when you get out there, as long as you're not pushing the envelope too far beyond your abilities. And the other thing is that when you start to find these blank spots, rather than get down on yourself and go, oh, I can't do it, look at it as a place in which to start to train in a new ability or a new level of understanding in which you can start to step into. Okay. So the other thing is, it's not so much about visualizing and creating it all. Remember, like I said in the beginning of this session, is that when you can accept the possibility of infinite potentials um, being available to you, and that all you need to do is tune your energy into them and train your mind and body and your energy into those new timelines, then instead of visualizing and creating the whole situation scenario, what you're doing is you're just, even if it's only by a thread, connecting with that future timeline as many times as you can throughout the day, all day long, if possible, until it becomes that new normal for you to feel and think and be that person that arrives at that destination now. And what you do is you tune in, and then you relax and allow that energy from outside the third dimensional time space to connect with you and start feeding and filling you up and drawing it to you, and allow that reality around you to warp and flux and change as your energy signature warps and fluxes and changes. And so a good sign is that when you're tuning in, is you start to get, first of all, you'll start to see glitches in your matrix where things don't work the way they usually work. Things are going to just break or disappear, or they vanish, or weird shit's going to happen that normally is a no-brainer. And you're going to get a lot of resistance too, like the old reality trying to pull you back into it as you start to venture out, past the boundaries. And so, this isn't where you need to get in there and have a big battle and do, Gandalf on the bridge with the Ragnarok, you shall not pass, if sometimes it'll come to that, but if you're aware enough, then you can just go, oh, okay, here's, a little hook in my side. Rather than, fight against it and yank it and curse it, I'm just going to find it, unhook it, and let it go. And not push the edge too much. And so it's like, it's like if you're getting into fitness and you're running, find a pace that you can consistently do 2 and 3 times a week, where you're not going to hurt yourself. Put enough stress on you to keep growing and making the body adapt and recover to that new level. But so it's so consistent that you're not going to not be able to do it next week, or it's going to cause so much pain that when you start pushing and trying to make your targets of doing 2 and 3 times a week, that the body's going to throw a fit and start to break down and sustain injuries, which is only going to, it's going to lengthen your adaptability and recovery time, and it's going to make you have to sit in the old reality more and more. And sometimes that's there to bring your attention back to something you've missed. So it's like, hey, before you leave, you have to deal with this situation that's holding you here. You have to unhook from this. And so that's, there's some telltale signs that you're actually in the process of shifting to that new timeline. And when that happens, just relax and go, okay, I'm on my way. I'm actually right on track, because none of this would be happening, if I wasn't moving my energy towards that. it'd all just be boring and same old, and nothing would change. So this is a good sign. And then you can start to work on those things that are preventing you from just allowing that to become your new normal and slotting in. And so these are your edges that I'm talking about that you work within. Okay. Let me just go back to this because I think there was something else in there. Okay, so so it's interesting because when I get these questions in, I usually take a walk, and all these things come to mind about what I would say, and then when I get here, I always say something different because this is the nature of being in the flow state, is that you don't actually know exactly how you're going to be in that moment. And this is part of the excitement of when you're actually out there doing it, is that you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. You don't know what movements you're going to make through it. And so it becomes revealed to you. It's a process of discovery. And it would kind of be boring if you knew exactly what you were going to do, or if you're following a script, it would come out a bit clunky and canned, And so it's like sparring, and being in that state of no mind. You want to know that no matter what's thrown at you, that you're going to be able to respond somehow and deal with it. And when you start to get sharper at this, you start to surprise yourself at how easily and how well you can adapt through things. And so I was looking at a video this morning. This is something I thought about talking about that's just come. I haven't really needed to stress my brain to find it. It just turns up at the right time, at the right place. And so the video was, doing 100 push-ups a day and what it does to your body. And at first, just based on the title, I'm thinking 100 push-ups a day every day. And what does it do to you over time? But he didn't even talk about doing 100 push-ups every day. He talked about, if that's your goal, these are the sorts of things that you're going to face. First of all, the first time you do it, if you've never done it before, you're going to be sore, and you're going to need about 48 hours rest afterwards. So automatically on the first day that you've done your 100 push-ups, the next 2 days you're not doing any. Okay, and this is like when you have a deep meditation or a big shift, you've got to give yourself time to adapt and recover. And so this is the process. You get stressed, your brain and your body, and you have all these sensations. You're tracking everything. You're seeing where your limits are, where your edges are. You're seeing what you can do, what you can't do from this current position and in frequency, in time and space. And then part of your subconscious is recording all of this data. And just like, machine learning, it's not worried about the mistakes. It needs the mistakes. It needs the edges. It needs the limitations to be able to know what the next generation of movements are going to be, what the next generation of the program is going to be. Excuse me. And so there's two main areas to this. One is efficiency in the brain and body. So your brain and body is learning how to do this practice, whether it's meditation, timeline jumping, attracting yourself into potential timeline futures, manifesting things, whatever you want to call it, basically just aligning with these new timelines. The brain and body is conditioning itself to be able to do this exercise, and each time it does it, it gets better and better and better at it until eventually it reaches its goal. And the other thing is, the body and mind is adapting to the stresses of that new shift. So, let's go back to the physical body and fitness. If your goal is to run a marathon, you're going to start off running. Maybe you don't even start running, maybe you start walking. All you're doing is walking. And then you start increasing the amount till finally you can walk, and adapting and getting the body used to walking. And then finally you get to that level where you can walk a marathon. And then maybe, it kills you the first time and you have to recover. It takes you several days or a week to recover. And then you do it again and again until you can just walk it normal. You can just walk it once a week. And then, or twice a week, or 3 times a week, maybe your goal. So maybe it's 3 times a week to get there. And then next time, what you're doing is you're going to start walking and then running a little bit and then going back to walking. And maybe you do that 2 or 3 sets of that through that time. And then you keep doing that, and the body becomes more efficient at running in those small intervals, and then resting and recovering and adapting. And then you end up one day out of those 3 days, you end up running the whole thing, and you end up wanting to vomit the first time, but the brain and the body adapts to all that and goes, okay, next time I'll make these little adjustments before we do it, and by next week, this time, maybe we'll be in a better position. And the next time you don't puke, but you're sore, and then the next time you're not so sore, and then you can do once a week, and then walk 2 to 3 times the rest of the week. And you do this over and over until that one becomes normal, and then you feel like running the second leg. So you run 2, or you run part of 2, and then you run 2 and then walk the third, and then you run all 3, and then that's sore again, and you got to adjust again, and then all of a sudden you run 3 and it's not so bad, you run 3 and not so bad, and then 3, 3, 3, and then you can just do it over and over again. You don't have to think about it. Your body and your mind is tuned in. You're in that new frequency, and that's it. That's who you are now. And then, of course, from there, you're going to want to push into a new edge, into a new timeline. And so the cycle goes on and on and on. So if you can become aware of how to train the mind and body, and you get good at this, then it's not going to matter what it is that you want to do, because it's all in the potential timeline future that's available to you now. And it just becomes a matter of training your mind and your body into that new space, that new way of being. And so we're going to wrap it up there. I hope that helps. What I would like you to do, if you're going to continue with us in these question and answer sessions, these training sessions, I'm going to open it up to speakers to actually speak, with me on the screen, and we can do hot seats right in live in real time. What we're going to do is we're going to be addressing these questions, and when I say worthy questions, I mean these are questions that you really don't know the answer to, or that you've had a good time, spent a good amount of time working things out. And so these aren't just flippant questions that you're too lazy to answer yourself. And we're going to be dealing with these edges, these unknowns together. And so before you come along, if you just want to sit back and passively, listen and walk your mind through what the people are talking about, what I'm talking about, that's fine. No problem there. But if you want to pose a question, please take some time to construct it, and also be aware of where you're coming from when you ask the question. Okay? Because if you're coming from a place of fear and lack, then it doesn't matter how I answer the question, it's always going to give you an answer that you're not going to be satisfied with. But if you come from a place of at least neutrality, or an elevated emotion, a heightened emotion, something that's going to put you into a good state of being, and you ask the question from there, then where we can take things is going to be really, really good. Okay, we can actually cover a lot of ground, and you'll get a lot of value out of these sessions. So they're the kind of questions I'm talking about. Doesn't matter what the topic is, or what the technique is, what the level is. It does matter where it's coming from and what your approach is to the question. So don't be offended if I don't answer your questions, because they're taking us in the wrong way energetically. Okay, so please put some good thoughts into your time and energy into your questions, and if they're on track and they're moving in the right direction, I'll do my very best to address them. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks very much for participating, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.